Thanks for checking out the I Am More Than podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Wessel, a former Miss Arizona USA, professional model, self-acceptance advocate, hype girl, and founder of More Than Inc. In this podcast, we talk about the things that actually matter, from mental health to health and wellness, body image and confidence, and social issues. We're here to uplift, educate, inspire, and grow together. Each week, we'll feature a unique and incredible woman to share her story of how she's so much more than whatever you may know her as. We'll laugh, cry, and feel inspired in every episode, and trust me, there's no topic off limits. Whether you're commuting, working, or enjoying a glass of wine, we're so honored to have you here, and I'm excited to welcome you to the More Than movement. We're just getting started. What's up, fam? Welcome back. I released an episode last week that was the most candid and unfiltered solo episode I think I've ever done, and one that I put the least amount of thought into. I recorded it and just put it out there with really no expectation, and the response that we've gotten has been so wonderful. I love knowing that this podcast is making a difference. I love that my story and my experiences were able to resonate with you and make you comfortable enough to want to open up to me about the stuff that you're going through. It's just been really cool. So if you haven't heard that episode yet, I highly encourage you to go check it out. And if you do love this podcast, please remember to share it with your friends, your family, social media, all the things. It just helps us grow and reach even more people. So for this week, it's going to be a very different style than you're used to. My best friend Lex was visiting from California, and we decided to have a little rosé and grab the mic and just start talking about navigating your 20s. We've been best friends since, I think I was turning 20 when I first met her, and now I'm 28. She's almost 30, and it was cool to just sit and talk about the lessons that we've learned throughout our 20s, some of the crazy experiences and stories we went through, and we also dive into mental health. Like I mentioned in the last episode, with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, I really want to be able to just have normal conversations surrounding the stuff that I'm going through. Lex opens up about the mental health struggles that she's gone through. It's an episode that really goes all over the place. You're going to see an entirely different side to me, mainly because I have my best friend here and I'm not just talking to the mic and I'm not talking to a guest over the computer screen, and also because the rosé was flowing. So I hope you love this style of podcast. And without further ado, let's just dive into it. I said that I want the I Am More Than podcast to feel like you're having a glass of wine with your girlfriend. And so today we are having lots of rosé, and you guys are going to get to know my best friend, Lex. In this episode, we're kind of going to go over like being in your 20s in the 21st century, because when we were talking, we realized that we have been best friends for all of our 20s. And we've been through every phase of our 20s together.
Every single phase. All the phases of your 20s.
All the phases.
There's like 7 in there and no one talks about it.
Exactly. No one talks about it. So we are just going to let you into a very unfiltered conversation. Grab some rosé. I think you can tell I've already had 2 glasses, but it's going to be so much fun. So Lex and I met each other in college. She was my first friend that I met when I joined a sorority my sophomore year of college. So for those of you who don't know, we both went to ASU. And
Party school. I have a fork up, but it's
but you can't see it, thank God. But we both went to ASU, and I rushed a sorority my sophomore year. And right when I got in, we went to like a casual dinner spot with just a bunch of sorority girls. And Lex and I were seated right next to each other and just like hit it off, and there was no turning back.
Completely hit it off. It was like a soul friend that you find, like the stars aligned and suddenly you find a friend, and that was Jordan.
Yeah. Instant best friends.
Yes.
And now we've been together,
almost a decade.
Which is just insanity. Insanity. But rewind to a decade ago. I was 19, had no idea what the heck I was doing. And I feel like when you're 19 or when you're 20 and you're like fresh into college, whether you chose to go to college or if you're just trying to like navigate life now that you're kind of on your own, it's so hard to like build a community.
It is. It's impossible.
It's impossible.
It also depends on where you live, kind of the stage of your 20s you're in. But I feel like when you're in your early 20s, you're still totally figuring yourself out. Like, you have no idea who you are. You're kind of floundering.
Yeah.
You're flapping around in a mini dress
Just
most of the
doing
time.
the best you can. I feel like you're so desperate, or at least I was just so desperate to just have friends.
Yes, same. And
Like,
you want acceptance.
Yeah.
And you'll do whatever it takes to kind of get accepted, whether that means, you know, wearing what everyone else is wearing, or wearing the brands that people love, or
going to spots that you don't want to go to just because that's where everyone is going.
yeah,
Like frat houses.
frat houses, for instance.
Example A. But when I got to ASU, I went through all freshman year without really knowing my place, which for those of you who've kind of listened earlier in the story, my freshman year was kind of when like my whole life fell apart and I was having a bunch of health issues, just trying to like get my health realigned. And once I had figured that out is when I also joined a sorority. So I was like very much in a transitional period of life, just trying to like find my place and having the full college experience.
You were also so mature for your age too. Like, I think you were never, you were never you were always 19, 21, but like you lived it in a way that wasn't like the 19, 20 to 21 year olds that were in Tempe at the time. I think everyone sort of had such a party mentality, and you kind of brought the mom vibe a little bit.
I'm such a mom. But I think that's one of like, it's probably a double-edged sword, because so much of me, and it's always been me, is like, tell me everything about you. Like, what makes you you? Let's have deep conversations. And like, how can I support you? And it's like, we're 19 and I'm just trying to like chug a Jaeger bomb. We don't need to have a serious conversation right now. Calm down.
We don't need that.
Which is why I feel like I've always felt on and off throughout my life. I've very much been like in a crowd of people, but like I gravitate very much to like one person or two people. Like I keep my circle very, very small.
Yeah, you do. You're a small circle kind of gal.
I totally am.
But I think that's the best way of going about it.
I think it's benefited me so much because now being in my later 20s, I feel like I'm the exact same way. So I just was ahead of the curve.
You were just ahead, yeah. You were just modern for your age.
Just the modern woman, what can I say? What can I say? But as we were in college is also when we were approached to do the Miss Arizona USA pageant.
Yes.
We were literally in a sorority chapter meeting when the pageant director walked in and told us all about what Miss Arizona USA was. We didn't know. Neither one of us knew anything about pageantry.
Zero.
And I remember like a sign-up sheet going around. And Katie Smith, which shout out to Katie Smith if you're listening to this, literally put my name down. And I was like, I don't know what pageants are. Like, I don't think I'm a pageant girl.
Yeah, I think pageants at the time had such a kind of a meaning attached to them that felt more degrading than it really was, felt a lot more possessive than it really was, felt more kind of like itemizing a woman than really the experience actually is. So I think there's kind of a connotation attached to the pageantry world.
Totally.
Which
and when you don't know
true.
anything about it, it's very easy to make like preconceived notions about something that you have no idea about. I feel like that goes for everything. But especially when you look at something like the pageant world, now that we've both been in it and seen it, I feel terrible for ever even thinking that it was so surface level, because it's not. But I'm so glad we went through that experience together, because Lex and I were still very tight before going into pageants. But I feel like pageantry brought us so much closer.
Yeah.
And when we went through the weekend, we had 4 or 5 sorority sisters also doing it?
Yeah, we had a couple other girls from our chapter doing it. So I think it made it kind of a bonding experience for us backstage and
it made it a fun weekend. And for people that don't know what goes into pageant weekend, it's 3 days long. You show up at a hotel.
It's a marathon.
And you meanwhile, you've prepped for however long before you've come into this. Some girls prep for a year, some girls prep for months. I think we prepped for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Showed up, had absolutely no idea what we were doing. At least I know I had zero clue what I was doing.
I was still in the I'll just take a shot and walk on stage kind of feel. I was in that mindset, so.
Which is probably the best mindset you could be in. But I remember having so much fun that weekend, mainly because we were just with friends.
Yeah.
And weren't taking it too seriously.
And we were with such incredible women.
Yeah.
you're surrounded by women that are so incredible. They all are go-getters. They're all, trying to find their own confidence. Who's not out there trying to find their own confidence? I mean, you do it for that reason. You do it to figure out who you are. And it's a scary experience, but it's
a terrifying experience. But I think now, having like been through it and now on the other side, I think the strongest possible woman is one that can like put on a bathing suit and like walk in front of a bunch of judges and like believe in herself and know that she's worthy aside from just the way she looks.
Yes.
Because when we were 19, I was not looking at it that way.
No, and there's nothing more terrifying than being half naked in front of a judge panel, and the fact that you did it at that age is just showcases kind of your strength early on, and you don't realize how strong you are until you come out of it and you're like, wow, I just did that.
And it's such a weird backwards way of like discovering that confidence, but I feel like everyone that I've talked to that's been through the pageant experience all feels the same way.
Yes, like there's almost this revelation at the end of it where you're like, and whether they do it again, do the pageant, like are committed to the pageant world and keep coming back year after year, or whether they're just like a one-off, that was fun, I discovered a part of myself that I love. I think there's a lot of people that do it that way, kind of like how I did. I think I did it a few years, but once I got that experience under my belt, I was like, I grew half an inch in this process.
Totally.
So,
totally. Which I think is what makes it can get totally addicting, but I also think that it's just such an empowering experience that nobody understands it unless they've literally walked through those shoes.
Done it, yes.
But I felt the same way that once we actually went through the process, oh my God, these shoes are so... Laundry. I literally was like 6'5" in these shoes.
Strappy stilettos.
Oh, and I still can't properly walk in heels. I don't know how I ever did it on a stage. But going through the whole weekend, and I remember you and I backstage like having the most fun ever.
Dancing and just, we looked great. We felt great. We felt empowered. We felt so, you feel your best self when you're about to walk out there. And there's nothing, no matter what it took to get there, like some girls, do diet. Some girls work out extra hard. There's a lot of work that goes into it. But I think that process in itself is so empowering.
I agree. And I think the fact that we were so young and so naive is such a benefit.
Yeah.
Because then you carry what you learn there throughout your life. And I feel like that was such a defining moment in my 20s that I don't know where I would be if I didn't go through that process.
It was a growth. It was a growth period. It was a growth spurt, actually.
It really was. And I remember being on stage and looking at the video, the crowning video, literally when they announced my name, you see Lex in the background just like fall. Like just happy as can be.
She's on the ground. We lost her. She's gone.
It was amazing. And then people start like trying to trample and she's like still trying to walk on her heels to get off the stage.
Just trying to make my way to the new crowned Miss Arizona.
It was amazing. And I just feel like that experience brought us even closer.
Yes, it
on
did.
top of it.
I couldn't have been more happy. And I've never had that feeling before where you're just so happy for the other person. I've never had that feeling, ever. Like, I've loved friends. I've always been really close with whoever I'm close to. I've kept my circle very small. But I feel like in that moment, I was so happy and proud of the person that I was friends with that it just didn't even matter what was going on. Like it had nothing, and I've never felt that before. And I think that's kind of when I knew that we were in this for the long haul.
Literally.
We're going to be grandmas and, with our walkers together. So that's kind of when I figured it out. But it was a very new experience, a very new feeling. Because you're supposed to be competitive.
Yeah, which I think is something that really just doesn't come naturally to me. And I think that benefited both of us.
Yes, I think
because
so too.
it's such a foreign emotion to me.
Yeah, neither one of us sway.
Yeah.
Jealous. Like, that's just not in the personality types, which I think is why we work so well.
Probably.
But I also feel like we're such opposites too that there's nothing really to be jealous of in each other. Because we're just, we are so different. So it doesn't really matter.
Opposites attract.
Yes.
And again, for those of you who don't know us, I feel like the majority of the people listening probably already know our full story. But Lex is in town visiting. Rewind. We're in Texas right now. She's visiting for the first time.
We're in Austin right now. Breaking news.
And we were sipping some rosé and was like, you know what? Let's just put a mic in front of us and just have a normal conversation.
Yeah. we've wanted to. So
yeah, and I think
so
it's
proud
just
of her.
Well, you're just the best. And I think reflecting on everything that we've been through has been really cool.
It has. That's a process in itself.
Yeah.
Just, going back down memory lane, figuring out, what your 20s looked like then. I'm 29 this year and I'll be 30 this year. So, I was 29 last year. December 26th is my birthday.
So I will be 30. That's confusing.
So I'll be 30 this year, and I feel like it's my last year in my 20s. Yeah. And how much has changed in the last 9 years since turning 20 is incredible. Again, I met you at 20, so I know. Within the last decade almost, we've grown so much. But there's so many different phases of your 20s.
Yeah, and I think too throughout the rain, you were my saving grace. Like, you were my rock throughout the whole thing. And then you started preparing to compete again the next year.
Yeah.
Which I think for me was such a cool, proud best friend moment, because seeing like the growth within you, even in a year, and seeing you show up to the same stage a year later and being a completely different person was so cool to watch.
It was wild. I mean, I never ever thought I would be in the pageant world to begin with. But after the first year I did it and then you won, I remember just being like, I think I'll give it another shot. Like, that was so fun. I met so many great girls. I met myself in the end, like, is what ended up happening. So I was just so addicted to seeing the growth of myself that I wanted to do it another year. And you were the best help in all the ways.
I had like literally not even a year of experience, and suddenly I was like, let me take everything I've ever learned and just like pack it into you.
She did, and we got in our swimsuit. I got in my own bikini, and in the middle of, I don't know, December or November in Arizona, it was probably in the like low 40s at this point, and I'm in a swimsuit, and she pulls up her car with headlights on, and we're in the middle of the street, and she makes me practice my walk. And she made me practice that stupid walk like 8 to 9 times, probably 20 times, and I'm just forgetting. But again, shoulders up, stomach in, more powerful walk. Like, she coached the hell out of me in that moment. So I remember.
And your walk was unreal. Let me tell you.
I think my second year, my walk was phenomenal. But again, it was just about breeding that sort of confidence. And it wasn't even anything you said necessarily. It was just how you made me feel in that moment too. Is just, you made me feel so powerful that I think you felt like you could do anything. You're like, of course I can do this again. I'll do it a second time. I'm not even cold. Like, so I think you just have kind of a skill set with that in a sense that you empower people. You make them feel so powerful. And I think that was one of your many talents in your reign.
Hey, thanks. I think I discovered it in my reign.
Yeah, I think you did too. I don't think you knew that about yourself until you were there.
Not a clue. Not a clue, but I feel like I've always kind of seen that within the people that I love and the people that I get close to. Like, I feel like that's almost for everybody, and maybe it's not. Maybe this is just something I don't know about myself, but like when I look at other people, I can see every best quality and unique skill set about them, and it's so exciting to me to be able to like get them to see that in themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think I do. Yes, I agree with that, but I also think that it takes people a while to get to know you too in order to open up. But I think you kind of have this like a special way about you to where like once you do actually open up to somebody, you're so special. You're so incredible. You're over the moon for this person. Like you become their best friend instantly, and and you just naturally have that. But I think sometimes that can be easily misunderstood in terms of like, this person is just so nice.
Yeah.
Or this person is just so kind. Or this person is just so sure of themselves. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I think you bring that to a lot of people, which you should never taint your confidence for anyone else. But I do think you can be overwhelming. Like, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah. And I think what I'm learning more and more and more about myself is like, which I don't fully understand, of course, because I've never seen me through somebody else's lens or somebody else's perspective. But what I've learned, especially through doing this podcast or through any of like the coaching that I've done or talking to other women, is like, once you actually have a conversation with me, it's much less intimidating than you go into it thinking it's going to be so much more, which is so wild to me.
Well, it's hard for me because I know you so well.
I know.
So it's hard for me to say, but I do know that this goes for anyone. But I think, especially you, someone so bubbly, so happy, so just naturally and organically like drawn to people, you just automatically want to know about their life. And it's not fake. It's not fake. It's like you just genuinely want to know
everything.
And that's okay. But I think some people, it's hard for some people to be like, she really wants to know. And she really wants to know.
And I'm very direct.
Ladies and gentlemen.
I'm very direct. And I'm overly curious.
You're overly curious. You poke and you prod, but I think in all the right ways. And I think you bring out the best in a lot of people. And I don't think they know that.
I mean, obviously don't make me cry. Let's stop that right now. But I think the way that you're able to see me too is because you saw me, especially right after giving up my reign and going through that really transformational year of my life.
Yeah.
Like I was in the worst, most insecure place I think I'd ever been.
Yeah, that was a tough transition.
It was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible. And I feel like so much of the year in my pageant experience was so wonderful. Like I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I think so many people that were in the industry were so candid about like what needed to change about me to get me to the next level.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough pill for someone to swallow, especially when you're so impressionable. Yeah. Being 20 and being told these things that needed to change about the way I look that like I had never noticed about myself.
Right.
Like my teeth being too small.
Or your boobs too small.
My boobs too small.
Or your butt too big.
Yep. My hips too big, my thigh too small, my waist too, like you got really nitty gritty into it. And I think I was able to completely brush that off throughout almost the whole year. And then after, it's like everything fell apart.
Well, I think it hits you different because you now have all that feedback. That feedback didn't go anywhere. Yeah. It sat in your brain. It sat there and it cooked itself. And it just sort of, and then at the end of your reign, you're like, I'm still sitting here with that feedback. It doesn't feel good now. And they're meanwhile like, okay, on to the next.
Yep, exactly. It's the weirdest process when you go through something like that. And I think I can't relate it to anything outside of pageantry, but like when you do pass on, it's literally like you go from so much importance 1 second and the next second it's like shoo her off as quickly as you can. Like that's old news and we need new news.
On to the next.
Yeah. And it's not right or wrong, but like it hit me a lot deeper than I thought it ever was going to.
How could it not? I feel like that's so human. I mean, you have to feel a certain way about it because if you didn't, that would be kind of abnormal.
Totally.
So
totally.
I think every girl feels that when they go through it. I know I did, and I didn't even win. I wasn't even in the spotlight like you were. So I think that industry in general just kind of breeds a certain pressure that you become so immune to and so good at adapting to that once you get spit back out into the real world, you're really great at handling feedback. You're really great at handling criticism. You're really great at, being told no and being able to handle it. But you also have this thing sitting in the back of your mind, like, do I need to change this? Do I need to tweak this? Should I whiten my teeth? Should I get extensions? Should I do the bangs? Should I, you never bangs. Just kidding. But you can't help but think all those things, even after the fact. So
you're so right. And I think my coping way, instead of like confronting it head on, for the beginning, I had just turned 21. So like we just did everything that you do as a 21-year-old. I was running away from literally any type of difficult feeling and I had the time of my life. Don't get me wrong. That was one of the best/worst chapters. Which is such like a weird oxymoron.
But isn't it for everyone?
I think so.
You're so awkward and odd at 21 to 25. And every year your life drastically changes. You are such a different person from 21 to 22, from 22 to 23, 23 to 24. Like every year you kind of become a different version of yourself. And I said this a long time ago to, I feel like you,
probably,
when I ran away to Europe. But
oh, yeah.
You run away from yourself to run into yourself. And I think that's a huge part of what pageantry was, is like you're running away from maybe some of the things you're afraid to confront, but this makes you feel good because once you accomplished it, like look at what you accomplished.
Yeah. And I think it's so easy to run away. And I also feel like that's kind of what your 20s are for too.
Running away.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think your 20s get to be your overly selfish years. If that's, I mean, what you choose to do. Everybody has a very different path, which I'm sure is something else we'll dive into. But I feel like in your 20s, you get to like discover and lose yourself time and time and time and time again. But then when you get to like your later 20s and you've done that enough times, you're like, oh, I know myself inside and out.
Yeah.
Like I am fully aware of myself. I think that's also where you like run into like, okay, it's time for self-discovery. Like, let's do some therapy. Let's do some like, let's deal with our things.
Let's confront them head on.
Literally.
Well, I started therapy a couple years ago, and I feel like it was one of the best things I ever did, just to get you talking and thinking about the things that do bother you. Because I think for a lot of people, 90% of people suppress what bothers them. And I think being able to finally talk about it with someone is, everyone would be a better person if they went to therapy. That's what I fully believe.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. I pushed it off as long as I possibly could. And then the second I started doing it,
well,
I'm like,
it's hard to admit you have an issue. And it's not even that you have an issue. It's simply like you're just being human. Every human needs to talk to another sound human being about what bothers them.
Yep.
And some people just don't have a sound friend to do that to. So they need a therapist.
Yep.
And
there's no shame in that.
And I have a friend and a therapist. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Like you can have both.
It's called balance.
Yes. So I think, I don't know. I'm such a believer in therapy.
I am too. I can only speak for myself, but I know that when I was like getting out of 21, 22 is then when I really like hunkered down, went back to school. We started working full time together, which that was a whole other wonderful chapter. But we worked in like the quote unquote corporate world together, which was interesting to navigate. And I remember doing some like really deep work within myself during that time and really trying to figure out like, who am I? Like, what do I believe in? What do I stand for? What do I like about myself? What, like, I really had to dive into that. And then I feel like a switch like flipped suddenly and I came to you and was like, hi, I'm back. I feel better than I've ever felt. Like, I feel like I dealt with the things that I needed to deal. And like, now it's time to propel forward. And I think that's the confidence aspect that so many people see from a very surface level without ever realizing like the very long 2-year nasty struggle that it took to get that clarity.
I agree with that. I think that there was such a time of growth for you that you didn't showcase.
Yeah.
And you were very reserved with who you opened up to in that time.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair. I think that's what everyone does. But I think once you came out of it, you're this new person and everyone's confused. And they're like, we didn't see the growth part. We didn't see the shut off part or the part where, Jay shut down and did her own internal work for a little bit, which everyone has to do. You were just in the limelight at that point, and it just happened to fall in a time period where you were trying to grow.
Yeah.
If you were 26 and going through the Miss USA process, I think it would be a totally different thing for you.
Totally different.
But you were so young and so, like you said, impressionable that you had to go through those growing pains alone.
Yeah.
And then come out different. And I think when you did come out different, it was shocking, but it was also so you and just so like, she's emerged, she's here, like this big reveal of...
It was like a butterfly.
It was.
It was like in the caterpillar. I was in a cocoon for 2 years.
Suddenly just out, and she's back, but how could that experience not affect you to that degree? I mean, you're in the limelight, you're in a swimsuit, you're in bandage dresses, you're in full hair and makeup every day. You're never just you. You could never just be you in a way.
And a part that I've actually never talked about, but what you're like reminding me of during that time is it wasn't even like the surface level stuff of like imagery that you're going through. It was more like the people that come out of the freaking woodworks when you have any type of limelight on you at all, that want to capitalize on every single opportunity that you could potentially bring. I think that was the most difficult part.
Yeah, and watching that too, I remember being a protective best friend and trying to, ward off all the people that are trying to, in quote unquote, use you for certain things. And I think that came with that year. Yeah. And I think that tainted you in a way where how would it not?
Yeah.
Of course it's scarring. Of course you're going to think people are using you. Of course you're going to think people are out to, like you said, capitalize on what you have to offer. So, of course.
It was crazy. And I think that taught me so much about, again, like you said, when you get to know me, there's a lot more there.
Yeah.
That I think that even with the podcast, we're 43, 44 episodes here, but just you guys listening to me talk to myself about like things that I've learned, it's very difficult to get to a place to like really draw that out unless you're with somebody literally staring at you that knows everything. That's like come on, deeper, come on.
I'm like, let's go deeper. Let's bring it deeper.
Let's peel it back. Come on, you little onion.
You little onion.
So I think that's why I want this podcast to be able to kind of transition into that, because it can only help people the more real and vulnerable you are. Mm-hmm. So I think that was an important part of being able to like have a very candid conversation. And I'd love your guys' feedback on this too, because obviously this is one episode. She lives in California, which we can like figure this out if this is a style that you guys like. But I think it's important to be able to see a different perspective.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more depth than I think, a lot more depth to the company than I think people can see just by looking on social media.
I think there is depth to everything that you just, it's harder to portray when it's you.
Yeah. Oh, total. Like talking about yourself is
tough.
Impossible.
It's nearly impossible.
It's so hard.
But you have so many layers, and I think that there's so many layers that people don't see.
Yeah.
And just so many incredible layers that people don't see. So I'm one of very few lucky people who do get to see them. And I'm out here trying to market them because I'm in marketing. So I'm like, how do we get you out there into the real world?
We're doing our best, one step at a time.
Yes.
But I think part of just growing up, and I think something that so many of our listeners can relate to too, is the older you get, I think the more selective you get with who you choose to share your story with. I remember when I was talking to my therapist, she was talking about the fact that not everybody deserves to know your story. You have to only share when you have like safe space and safe people around you. And now we're in an entirely new chapter of our life. We both moved away from each other, which that's a whole other conversation. That's terrible. But I'm in Texas now. She's in LA, and having like your person time zones away from you and trying to connect with new people and make new friends and try and like dive into a new chapter, especially as we're approaching our 30s, is a beast.
It is a beast. It's insane. It's like it feels impossible some days.
Yeah.
But it's all part of growing up. I remember just talking to my own mom about turning 30 this year and being like, what do I do? What happens now? Do I get wrinkles instantly? Like, is this what happens? But she told me that the best life she had was from 31 to like 39. She said that she enjoyed her 30s probably the most of any time in her life, because you're still in the carefree phase of 20s, but you're also a little bit more established and sort of know what you want, and you're actually going after it at that point. Like in your 20s, you're just sort of talking about it. It's a lot of planning, a lot of this is what I want to do eventually. Whereas your 30s, you're actually finally going after it. So I'm excited for it, but I do think that, I'm going to live up this last year.
Of course, as you should. And your mom is so wise. I was actually thinking we need to bring on like a mom moment segment on here. And I need to just like bring Lisa Wessel in here and like shoot a crazy wild question at her and just get a candid
just
response.
What a mom response. A mom
we need to have a mom moment. Yes, moms are very important in your 20s. My God. It's like suddenly they become like your ultimate BFF.
And there's some people without moms. I think you gravitate towards a sister or a grandmother or your best friend. Like you find kind of the mom qualities in people that you love. So I think the mom lingo only goes so far. It's just a matter of finding
that person.
Yeah, finding that person.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a blood mom.
No. And I think just having a non-judgmental, loving person that like no matter what you say is still going to be there and love you is really big. And I think it's bigger the older you get and the more life you actually live.
Yeah.
Because now I feel like in my later 20s, I know my core people. I know who I need to go to for what and like who's going to be there to support. And the extra like acquaintances and fluff stuff doesn't matter quite as much.
Yeah.
That mattered so much.
It did. It matters so much when you're 21, 22. You want the quantity over quality kind of thing.
Yep.
You want the 10 friend deep group, or you want 20 friends to be able to take to the club. You want you want them all to be in matching bandage skirts and all matching heels.
Yep. With
the Michael Kors watch, rose gold watch. Yeah, that's what you want then.
Yeah.
But then you figure out that that's just not fruitful for you. It doesn't work that way. You can't spread yourself 20 people deep and still expect to get the same amount of return from each person. Like it's just not how it works. So
yeah. And like you said, like the quality over quantity, I think it's more important the older you get. And now so many people wonder, like, am I the only one that just has a handful? Like, is that just me?
No.
And I talk to so many people about it and they all say the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I think we just need to like, right? Like I think we just need to like tell anybody who's listening, if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is, it's okay to have like 2 solid friends.
I know. I have like 2 solid friends and both of them are from my sorority, but 2 best friends that I formed from that. And that's all I need.
Yeah.
Like just all I need. I don't need anything else past that.
And then you get like brunch friends.
And then you get your brunch friends.
Yeah.
And your party friends.
Yeah.
You know, your happy hour friends and your work friends. Like you kind of have friends for different things.
Yeah.
But you have your 1 or 2 friends who tackle every like aspect of friendship that you need. And those are the people that you tell everything to. But other than that, it's not like you don't need a whole lot.
No.
To be
happy.
If
you have them, hold them real close and like let them in. I think there's so many lessons that we learned in our 20s. That's something we should dive into. So lessons in our 20s. And one of the main ones is really hold on to those core people and let them in. I think for me, especially through that chapter of my life, when you were like, what's going on with you? I'm like, no, I'm fine. Like, just don't come any closer. But it's like letting in your friends, because by the time I did let you in, you're like, okay, well then like, let's work through it. I was like, well, dang it. If I let you in 6 months ago, I might be in an entirely different place now. Yeah. So I think it's really important that if you do have those trustworthy, good people, like let them in.
That is a huge thing of what I learned. I think the biggest lesson that I learned in my 20s or late 20s was simply just how to be honest with yourself, how to be honest with everyone around you, and representing honesty in your own way. And even if that means, you know, taking your hair extensions out and you're not wearing colored contacts or just not having a spray tan, like being the most natural version of you, I think is also very powerful. Obviously, we love to look good, so there's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with those things, but I think when you use them to mask something is when there's something wrong. And I think almost everyone in their 20s does something to mask something. Yep. And whether that's an appearance thing or whether that's a personality thing, you're hiding a part of your personality, or you're hiding a part of like your family, or hiding a part of what you look like, or whatever it is. I think we're all trying to hide something in a way. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned is just there's nothing worth hiding at this point. Yeah. It's all just should be exposed. It should all be out there. It's all a part of who you are. And it just makes you more honest and makes you more free. Like, I think you're just free.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge one. And I think a huge lesson, as I'm like itching my nose, my goodness, a huge lesson that I learned in my 20s that I wish I would have learned at like the beginning is that confidence doesn't have a look. Yeah. That I thought for a very long time in my 20s that if you like had certain measurements, if your skin tone looked a certain way, if your hair was long enough, if your boobs were pushed up enough, like that's confidence. And when you try and like finagle, kind of like what you were saying, when you're like masking those things and finagling to be the most confident version of yourself, there's always a little bit of emptiness there.
Yeah.
Which I think when I talk so much about like self-love and self-acceptance, it's more of like learning how to just truly be cool with who you are without anything added. Yeah. And then any enhancements to that, like just add to that confidence, but it's already there.
Yeah.
And I think if I would have learned that when I was in my earlier 20s, I think I would have taken a lot more risks. I would have started more than a lot earlier.
Yep.
You know, I would have just been at a different place, but obviously like you can't go back and change things. And my journey obviously brought me here. But I think that if I could go back and like shake my little 20-year-old self and be like, you're thinking confidence is something it's not. It would have saved me so much.
Well, I think so too. But I think there's also an element of this, a mental health element
huge.
to this that is very much like taboo for a lot of people. And I think anxiety, depression, bipolar, those types of mental health, not issues, but because they aren't issues, but struggles, like things you're going through are very real. I've gone through them myself. I know a lot about the anxiety, depression world. So I think being exposed to things that trigger that is actually almost therapeutic in a way.
Yeah.
Like you're being exposed to things that would trigger your anxiety or would trigger depression and would make you hole up normally.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity to then not slip into those areas. And I think a lot of the pageantry, a lot of our friendship even has been an opportunity for me to like, okay, slip out of that. You don't have to, you just need to latch onto the one person or find the one thing that empowers you or do the job that fulfills you or, you know, there's so many different ways you can fill that void as opposed to sitting there being like, I have to do this alone. Like, I think there's a lot of avenues there.
There's so many avenues. And I think knowing that now we're kind of after COVID, like going in a direction where it destigmatizes mental health.
Yes.
But I think we're still not 100% there.
Yeah.
And that's also something that like, if I think in our earlier 20s, if we were exposed more to that and could have those conversations more openly and also like talk about the importance of actually like facing those struggles head on so that you have the tools to handle life as it comes at you. But instead, I think so many people think that like they can figure out the tools along the way and eventually it'll all click. But there's like foundational building blocks in your life, right? When you can solve those foundational, not even solve, but like have the tools to help those foundational things like your mental health, your confidence, the way that you view yourself, the way you view your family. Like once you figure out those things that have shaped you and figure out why you are the way you are, life gets so much easier.
So much easier.
You get to handle things the way you want to handle things instead of like when you're talking about like a trigger response.
Yeah.
It's like you know exactly how you want to approach a situation because you already have the tools in your toolbox.
Yes, exactly. And having the tools in your toolbox is so crucial at this point in your life. I think once you hit your 30s, you have a few tools that maybe you don't know how to access, but they're there. It's just a matter of digging deep enough to find them. And I think that's what your 30s are more about, is finding those tools, experiencing those tools, getting them out, getting them like de-rusted and sort of, you know, finding your way with them a little bit. So by the time you're 40, you're thriving and you've figured it out.
Totally.
So,
and I think there's such a strong aspect of just realizing like you don't have to do this stuff alone. You don't have to do this life alone.
You don't.
And you also don't need to hide the parts of you that are difficult so that other people are pleased with the package you present.
Yes. And I think that's one thing that I probably struggled with a lot in my life is hiding a lot of the parts that are ugly and scary and not who people would be gravitated towards. I think I've just stuffed that in a hole and just said, that's not me. When really that is me. That's part of me.
It's part of who you are.
It's not a bad thing. It's just, we all have our baggage. We all have our trials and tribulations that we've gone through that have made us who we are. And I think that's just part of your story. And again, like you said in the beginning, not everyone deserves to know your story.
No,
but
they don't.
But your story is your story, and you personally should hold on to your story from start to finish. And you don't have to tell everyone every ins and out, but you should alone know what that story is.
Yeah. And every individual story too, we tell ourselves what the ugly parts are. We tell ourselves what people won't want to see. Mm-hmm. We come up with kind of this dialogue in our own head about like what the conversation would look like if we did talk to people about the stuff that we're struggling because it's quote unquote ugly. And I think that when you actually talk to someone about it and it's like, okay, like, I love you. Let's work through that.
Yeah,
it's all
let's
good.
Figure it out.
It's like so much easier than you actually like build it up in your head. So I don't know if that applies to you guys. I don't know if we're going off on a tangent, but I think that regardless, it's the parts that you're choosing to hold back from the people around you, or the parts that you think are the ugly parts of your story that you can never talk about. I would just challenge you to like get a little bit more comfortable with it, because I guarantee you it doesn't change the way people view you. If only thing, it just makes you stronger.
It does. And I had I'm going to speak just candidly right now, but I had a terrible experience with kind of a mental health episode, and one of my best friends was there, like, through it all. I thought at the end of it, like, having exposed that part of myself, that I would be shunned. Like, I would never have a friend in her again, or I would never be loved by her again. Like, I just thought that it was so ugly. It was too ugly to love. And I think coming out of that, I've realized that people just want to know you. So whether that's you being ugly, they want to know that side of you. And it didn't change our relationship. There's parts of it that, are maybe we're more skeptical on, but it doesn't change how that person feels about you if they love you to your core. And I think it's just a matter of finding those people that love you to your core, to where you can have breakdowns with them. You can have quote unquote episodes with them. You can be sad, you can be angry, you can be any human emotion imaginable, and they still don't discriminate against you. Like, they love you. Just speaking from experience, it was one of the most grounding things I've ever done, is expose that side of myself. But I think it's also a learning experience. Like, you have to learn how to expose that side of yourself. You can't do it in abrupt ways. You can't do it in like, guess what? There's this part of me and enter this part of me. Like, you have to do it in a way that's like natural, and it
natural
happens.
And healthy. And I think there's so many people that go through their life, and this is for all ages, that go through their life like hiding so much of that, which it comes to a point where like you only get to show like a very small portion of us. And I think that social media plays into that so much. That's a whole other episode for us to dive into. But I think because you see the package that people present, and people feel they need to keep up with that their whole lives, that no matter like what your age is, if you're listening to this, like, I don't think it's ever too late to be able to explore all sides of you, and to learn how to, like, if it's not loving all sides of you, it's being comfortable with all sides of you and accepting that, so that you can become an overall like confident person in every aspect. But I think so many people live so much of their lives not wanting to confront it. And then when it does arise, it's like pushing it down as far as you can possibly push it down, and not dealing with it. And I think in general, people would be so much more happier and so much more fulfilled if they just dealt with this stuff head on.
I agree.
That's my 2 cents.
That's my 2 cents.
At least that's what I learned in therapy.
No, I agree. I think that it's you shove it down far enough, it's like baking soda when you add Coca-Cola. Like, you just, right? Isn't that the science
thing's
project?
gonna pop.
That thing pops out. Like, I'm like, right? That's a science project, I think.
I think so.
But I think there's no good that comes from it. And I think I learned that kind of the hard way by stuffing it for so many years, and then having this big explosion of mental, like, kind of your mental capacity is shot, and you just never told anyone all along. And you get to a place where it's finally like you implode on yourself, and it impacts the people around you. And I think it can be a very ugly experience, but in my experience, yes, it was very ugly, but I think it taught me a lot about how to not stuff things anymore. And I think that's what I took from it is you explode and you're always going to explode. It has to go natural. Somewhere. The energy has to go somewhere. So it's just a matter of kind of filtering that through and putting it into a place that's positive. And even if that's your friends and your friends want to take that on. Yeah. You have to understand that too. Is like they love you. They want to take that on. And sometimes it's just a matter of sharing a tiny snippet of what you're going through to make them feel like they know what's going on.
Yeah. Let your friends be your friends.
Let your friends be your friends. Yes.
I think that's like, the moral of the entire conversation is like, just allow people in because you'll never regret it when you do. And if somebody makes you regret it, they might not be a real friend. You might need to reevaluate that friendship.
We just cut that off. We don't do that.
Also, there's nothing wrong with cutting off friendships. I feel like that's an entirely other episode too.
But I feel like friendships go through phases.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, even if something dramatic doesn't happen, like what we're talking about, and you have to like dramatically cut someone off, I think knowing that like relationships come and they ebb and they flow, and when somebody's not aligning with who you are at that moment, it's okay to distance yourself.
Yes,
like you don't have to feel like a terrible person.
I think it's healthy for both parties if distance is taken. Yeah. Because I do think that sometimes you become more hurtful in your spiral, or you become more positive in your spiral, and you can't cope with maybe the negativity of that person, or vice versa. Maybe that person is so positive that you're kind of bringing them down, and you don't want to do that either. Like, so it's all obviously very situational based, but I think the moral of the story is, yes, let your friends be your friends, but also know that your problems are also your problems, and not that you have to deal with them alone, but they also don't need to become everyone else's problem, because there's a slippery slope there.
It's a slippery slope, but I also think it's your responsibility to be the main character of your own story. Yeah. And if you can't take responsibility for how you handle the situations that have happened in your life, because you didn't dictate what happened in your life. A lot of the times things happen to you, but it also, I think, in a lot of ways happens for you if you decide to shift your perspective. Yeah. And it's up to you to deal with the cards that you've been dealt.
For you, not to you. Yeah,
totally.
I like that.
Isn't that? It's a good one-liner. But I think when you are able to take responsibility of your own life, and even though you may not be happy with a certain situation or a situation that happened to you, I think it's really important to like shift your perspective as soon as you can, because it gives you a lot of freedom to live out the rest of your life. Yeah. So many people like hold on to something and never show anybody and get really angry, really bitter. And that kind of becomes the main energy of their story. Yeah. And you don't deserve that.
No one deserves that. No. I think everyone deserves to be seen for who they are. So it's just a matter of exposing yourself to the right people. And sometimes you're going to expose yourself to the wrong person. And that's just going to happen. Yeah. And that's okay too.
That's part of life.
That's just what happens. Yeah.
And if your relationship, I think this goes for friendships, for intimate relationships, whatever it may be, if they can't accept all of you through every phase and love you for that, you might want to reevaluate the situation. Yeah. Because I think that's what makes those valuable relationships in your life different from acquaintances. Yes. Is they're there through the goods and the bads and the highs and the lows. Yeah. You know, so filtering through your life. And again, that's part of just getting older. Filter through your life. Make sure you have those people. If you don't have those people yet, just remember they're out there. And put yourself out there and go find them. I don't know how, but go do it.
I don't know how.
I don't know how you go make great friends in your 20s, but try it out.
Honestly, I take myself to dinner alone, and I've met some pretty incredible people.
I love that.
So I feel like I love being alone. I love exposing myself alone, because you open yourself up to a different type of crowd. Other people being alone is what you introduce yourself to, and a lot of those people are wanting to find other people. So
you just got to put yourself out there.
You have to do it.
Which is so scary, but
the best
can benefit you in a lot of ways.
The best thing I've ever done.
God, we have so many like one-offs to take an entirely other episode. I'm like, okay, we're approaching an hour, and like there's so many other things we can do.
Yes.
But I knew this was going to be dangerous.
This was what was going to happen.
But it's time to refill our rosé.
Yes.
And bring this to a close.
Yes.
And maybe we'll do another episode.
It's time for an end.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you like this style. Please give us feedback on our Instagram. If you loved it, please rate and review. Bye. Thank you, Lex. You're the best. Love you. Bye. If you're loving the I Am More Than podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us so much. And if you haven't already, follow us on Insta at More Than Inc. for all things inspo, More Than merch, and soon we'll be posting info about our in-person meetups. We're so thankful to have you part of this community and are always here to remind you that you are so much more than.